Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast with a very special episode and a very special guest. I'm here with the very talented, famous actor, performer, improviser, and a good friend of mine, Bill Chott. Bill, I'm so glad that you're here. So I tout my...
I'm so glad that I'm here in my living room as well.
We are coming to you live from Hollywood and from Bill's living room, which has also been my Airbnb for the last 3 days.
And also, to be technical, North Hollywood.
North. Oh, is that a bad thing?
No. Well, North Hollywood is a bad thing, but it's no Hollywood. I'll tell you that.
Hollywood people are going to come with pitchforks and be like, that's
They're
not...
going to see like, please, North Hollywood? I don't think so.
That's not Hollywood proper.
Yeah. Well,
you guys went up north to escape.
It was a real estate move. They actually called this area North Hollywood. It didn't always used to be called North Hollywood. I think it used to be called Lancashire, like the street.
Oh, okay.
Lancashire Boulevard.
I know that one. It's the diagonal one that was diagonal forever.
Yeah.
See, I know that.
And it goes right next to the Pacific Railroad station. That used to all the oranges from the San Fernando Valley used to go out from there. And so this was at one point all orange groves, so that was how they made all their money. Then they figured, like, how are people going to move here now that everybody wants to go into Hollywood? So they changed it from being called, I think it was called Lancashire. They changed the name.
It was a pure PR move.
To North Hollywood. So people go, like, oh, I'm in North Hollywood. No, you're not. You're all the way over the Hollywood Mountains.
So the very fact that I said that we're in Hollywood, I actually bought into that marketing scheme.
You totally did. You weren't under some false idea that you were in Hollywood, were you?
Not, well, yes and no. Like, I was saying Hollywood, like, people ask me, where are you from? I say Phoenix. I don't say Tempe, Arizona.
Oh.
But I know that Tempe and Phoenix are different. But
that's true.
To me, when addressing a large mass of people...
As a long time Los Angeles resident, I used to tell people I just I lived to LA.
Right. So, like, if I said, oh, we're coming live from Los Angeles.
But Hollywood is a technical city that is not L.A.
But is North Hollywood also?
But you know what? I think, didn't they used to, at the beginning of the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, they used to say, from Hollywood. Didn't they say that? Even though it's Burbank. And he would always make jokes about Burbank.
Well, there you go.
Anyhow, I'm getting way off topic. Please talk about me.
So, I met Bill. You were very gracious, so you met up with me. I still remember going to coffee with you that first day. I was new to Hollywood and or Los Angeles and or Pasadena, but definitely not North Hollywood at that time. And you were very gracious, and you sat down with me and just gave me the lay of the land, and I really appreciated that. And obviously, I have become more familiar with your career the more that I get to know you. You've just done some incredible things. And I just love talking to people who have gone for dreams, are going for dreams. And I would love to just give you an opportunity to share more of that story, how you got into acting, how this all happened, the ups and downs, the lows, the sideways, the Hollywoods, the North Hollywoods, and all of that for 7 hours nonstop. And begin.
So when I moved to Hollywood, which was technically Burbank, was 1997, which was the winter after the Dana Carvey show had been canceled. I moved from Chicago to New York, which was my first really big, network television show.
Which was the Dana Carvey show.
Dana Carvey show.
How did you end up in Chicago? Was that happenstance, or did you move there? It's like, I want to go pursue improv.
I moved to Chicago definitely to study improv at the Second City. I didn't know anything about Improv Olympic. I didn't know anything about Comedy Sports or the Annoyance Theater or all these wonderful places that I wound up, seeing shows and some of them studying and or doing shows at some of the places too. But I mainly went there for Second City because all my heroes were Second City alumni. And so I went to a newsstand because back then there was no internet.
What?
Believe it or not. I went to a newsstand.
But how did you get your news?
Well, we go to newsstands and we pay people nickel.
Well, was that like a computer there that you would pull up the news on a computer at the newsstand?
No, you talk to a fella named Chappie.
Good old Chappie.
And you could usually get a cigar or get your shoes shined at a newsstand too. But this wasn't as old-fashioned of a newsstand. but it had magazines and newspapers from all over the country, and in some cases all over the world if it was a popular, country.
Not the less popular country.
Something colonial.
Yeah. If you wanted a Bosnian newspaper, you weren't getting it.
Not this time.
Not in Chicago.
So I got a copy of the Chicago Tribune, and I applied for jobs working as a bank teller because I had worked through college as a bank teller. And so I got a job, and then as soon as I got the job, I found an apartment. I had to go to the newsstand again and get the Chicago Tribune to look for apartments.
This newsstand seems to be a real hub of information.
It really does. And then I found an apartment in Wicker Park, which was an up-and-coming starting to become gentrified. My block surely wasn't yet. But I guess in a way I indirectly contributed to the gentrification of the neighborhood. But yeah, that's when I moved to Chicago. That was the first time moving to a big city out of the suburbs.
Yeah.
And then I worked my way through Second City. And then I got cast in the Dana Carvey show, which took me from Chicago to New York. When that was over, there weren't that many productions as there are today. There's a lot of film and TV going on in New York nowadays. Then there was Spin City and the Conan O'Brien and the Letterman show. That was it. Those were the only shows going on in New York.
And SNL.
Was that a show?
Do we not talk about that?
No, I was kidding.
Okay.
I was actually, at that point, I was doing voiceover for Saturday Night Live because I had done the Dana Carvey show, and we started doing the Ambiguously Gay Duo and the Ex-Presidents. And so I had recorded 1 or 2 episodes of that while in New York. But other than that, there was not a lot of work going on. I had auditioned previously for Saturday Night Live, and from what I understood at the time, they weren't seeing people more than one time. Like you had your shot. I think nowadays they give people a little bit more of a shot. But so in that case, I decided to move out to Los Angeles, drove out here in a Ford Festiva, tiny little blue car, and found a place in Burbank with my friend Jim Coughlin. And Jim's roommate had just gotten married and moved out, and they had a bedroom open up. I had crashed at a bunch of places for that, including Chris Farley's apartment at there was this, I'm forgetting the name of it. It was almost like an extended stay hotel on Olive Boulevard or on Barham Boulevard as you go over the hills. And it's already changed names. I don't know what it is now. But so he was staying, his brother Kevin, who's a good friend of mine, was staying there and said, "Hey, Billy, you need a place to stay?" I was like, "Yes." And so we were both staying there, as well as Rich Fulcher, which some folks might know, who's recently in the Wonka movie. I was surprised. I was like, why did no one tell me Fulcher's in Wonka? But Rich Fulcher, who became much more famous, even though he was an American, became much more famous in England than he was here. And now, of course, he's made a great career for himself here in the U.S. of A. So the both of us were crashing there and like sharing. One of us would take the couch, one of us would take the bed.
Yeah.
And there were other places. My friend Jennifer and her husband let me stay with them out in Palmdale for a while, and then I realized that was too long of a trek.
And so, but this is all. So you're out here in the LA area.
Yes.
And what are you doing at this time? Are you taking classes? Are you auditioning? Are you just trying to figure out what the heck?
I was fortunate enough that on my drive out here, I got a notice that I had an audition at Danny Goldman.
And how'd you book that? Did you have an agent out here, or did they just?
I was
through Dana Carvey.
I was represented by at the time. I was represented by the William Morris Agency, which is now William Morris Endeavor, and they had offices like all over the world, but especially in New York and Los Angeles. And so they had signed me across the board for theatrical, commercial, voiceover, and the directors requested me because they had worked with me in Chicago.
Yeah,
I would work with them on an industrial, and they were the director producer team were doing a commercial. I can't remember what it was for AT&T or something. But I by the time I arrived here, they were like, "Yeah, we got this audition," and I booked it. And so I booked commercial work almost as soon as Danny Goldman referred to me as a carpetbagger when I arrived here. Imagine an LA casting director referring to someone as a carpetbagger. But he was
mean.
That was a term that was used in the Reconstruction in the South when like Northerners would move down south because like the South had been like economically destroyed, and so they would have all their belongings thrown into a carpet, and they would have bags made out of their own carpet because that was the easiest way to carry all the belongings. You didn't have to be that rich, but you could afford land down south, so they called them carpetbaggers. So that's what he was referring to me as.
And now we're getting a history lesson.
Every time you talk to me, kids, you'll get a history lesson.
Learn something new.
So, and yeah, Danny Goldman, who also started out as an actor. He was in Young Frankenstein. He was the guy that called him, Dr. Frankenstein. He's like, Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He was that young student. Later went on to become a casting director. We just lost him a few years ago. But yeah, that was my first audition. So I already had an audition on the way out here. And my friend Jim, who I was mentioning earlier, Jim Coughlin, was working in accounting at Disney, and he knew that I had worked in a bank as well previously. And he was like, hey, if you talk to, I think it was Apple One temp service, you talk to them, they can hire you here because we have an opening right now and I can put in a good word for you. Sure enough, I had a job, I had an apartment, and an audition. They talk about manifestation and making things happen just by your sheer will. And at that point in my life, almost everything that happened for me happened that way. There were tough points along the way. There were points where I was crashing on couches and didn't have an apartment, or one time my dinner was someone else's doggy bag that they had left behind at their table at the Second City because I was hosting there. You didn't get paid much as a host, but what you did get was paid and occasionally tipped, but paid to basically hang out at Second City and watch every show. So I was able to get moved up and be understudying the show, which is why I wound up being seen for both Saturday Night Live and the Dana Carvey Show, because I was understudying on a stage.
Yeah.
And it was because I was there. After I had seated everybody and hauled all the ice buckets that I needed to haul, I just needed to stay there and make sure that there were no disturbances in the house. Like, you had to make sure nobody was heckling or whatever. But, and so I got to know the show, specifically Pinata Full of Bees, which was, a revolutionary show for Second City. It was the first one that had like nonlinear storytelling and callbacks that would, go in and out like that, and very much Brechtian costume changes that happened on stage in front of you, and pre-recorded intro music for the scenes. Ruby Streak was amazing on the piano, but they wanted to start experimenting with other sorts of sound and music in the show. So I got to see that show, an amazing cast of people who've all gone on to do amazing things. Adam McKay, I wound up understudying for the most. But, I understudied for everybody in that show. Scott Adsit, from 30 Rock, John Glazer, Segway Sam, and also Delocated. We were just talking about him before we started here. And Scott Allman. All those guys were like some of the, amazing main stage cast at the time. And that was because I was hosting. But, that's it. Although I was hosting and working my way up to doing that, if it weren't for the fact that I was existing on doggy bag dinners and like literally scrounging change out of my friends' couches so that I can afford to buy a donut for breakfast, I wouldn't have been able to move up so quickly into the show.
Yeah.
Because I learned it by osmosis. I saw the show develop in front of
me. Wow. I'm just processing all this. So
am I.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it. And you talk about, like they say that, the strong branches are built by strong winds.
Right.
And there was definitely some strong winds going on. I was definitely, if not for my good friends, my friend Cassie Harlow, who let me crash on her couch for a while, my buddy Rich Tallarico, who later went on to work Saturday Night Live, Mad TV, Tonight Show, Key and Peele, all those shows. Both of those folks, were very kind to me and opened their couch. And I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting, people who were kind enough to support me when I was, not making much.
Yeah.
As a host at Second City. even though I was touring, I was in the touring company. They do not pay you much. I'm sure they have. I would venture to say they probably don't pay people much more than the $75 a show we were making at the time.
Right. They have not adjusted for inflation.
You'd only have 3 or 4 shows a month, but you had to be able to leave at a moment's notice. So unless you were working at a bar or a restaurant and you could just say, oh, I'm available this week, I'm not available. I couldn't go back to working at a bank anymore.
Yeah.
There's not banks that'll hire you. Oh, yeah, I'll pick up a shift on Tuesday. Come ahead and balance $2 million in the vault bank.
Right. So, okay, so let's see. So chronologically, so let's go. So you were in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I love that what you said about manifesting. Things are happening. The support that you were getting from friends. You come out to LA. You're same sort of thing. You're crashing here. You have an audition. You have an apartment. You have a job. And then let's talk some lows, and then let's talk some highs. How about that?
Sure.
So tell me, some maybe experiences that maybe knock the wind out of you, and then we can counterbalance that with maybe some positive. Because again, when I talk about dreams, I try to be very real that just because you have a big dream and you're going for it doesn't mean life is good or great. And sometimes it's the opposite. And I think that that's really important to just really be transparent about that.
Yeah, and on the other side, just because it's not happening yet doesn't mean it's not happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the best example would be that I moved to Chicago, I auditioned for Second City, and I didn't get in.
Right.
And not only did I not get in, I had to take a class called Improv for Actors. So it's like, you don't understand improv yet. You don't know the Chicago way.
Go to this class, you actor.
Even though I had been performing for a year at Catch a Rising Star Comedy Club in St. Louis, which was an A club, working with amazing people, like my friend Tom Johnson, who just passed away recently here this month. Talking about it just hits me sometimes when you think how many people we've lost in the past few years. Yeah. But Tommy went on to become one of the original writers on The Daily Show, and he formed this troupe. And so I had been performing, professional level improv and sketch comedy, but a lot of it was Mad Lib style improv. It wasn't real organic improv. Sure. And I was really upset that I had been performing professionally, and then these other people who had none of that experience were like right into the training center. I was so pissed. So I had to take this class called Improv for Actors. I was really down on it. And yet, that first day of class, I showed up a half hour early because I wanted to look at the list of people who had been on the stages at Second City, and I was figuring alphabetically where my name would have been. I would have been right above Del Close, who a lot of people wound up studying from. I only had 1 or 2 classes with Del, never like a full class session or anything like that. And so I met Rich Tallarico, who's one of my best friends to this day. We were both there a half hour early looking at that list.
Yeah.
And then we wound up with this nothing teacher that nobody had heard of, and I don't know if anybody's heard of him since, named Stephen Colbert.
Who's that?
Colbert, Colbert.
Colbert?
It could be pronounced either way. I could be saying it wrong.
Right.
I've never heard his name pronounced since. But see, so the thing that I wanted to happen didn't happen, but then I wound up meeting one of my best friends and one of the funniest comedy writers that I know, and getting a chance to study with Stephen Colbert.
Right.
I might have missed that opportunity because he was on his way up, and he was almost about to burst through the system really quickly and go on to do Exit 57 in New York. And then later we wound up working together on the Dana Carvey show, but I might have missed that opportunity and that connection and the opportunity to learn from him.
Right.
Were it not for me not getting through at that moment.
Yeah.
And then, I auditioned for Saturday Night Live and didn't get in, but it was because of that audition. I did this impression of Jackie Gleason taking a difficult crap. And that was the reason that Robert Smigel wanted to bring me in to show Dana Carvey that impression that he knew Lorne Michaels was hating in the SNL audition process. So the reason that I didn't get into Saturday Night Live was the reason that I got the Dana Carvey show, and the Dana Carvey show is the reason I wound up being on Saturday Night Live, because they used the Dana Carvey show to launch the Ambiguously Gay Duo cartoons, and we went on to do that. And like I said, the ex-presidents. And if it weren't for having missed out on the SNL audition process,
Right.
or doing it but not getting in, I wouldn't have eventually gotten on Saturday Night Live.
Right. So the only way you got on Saturday Night Live was by not getting on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
Reminds me of Shane Gillis. I don't know if you know Shane.
Oh, yeah.
Right, who got fired from SNL and then, has to slug along for the next 4 or 5 years, but then now has had this meteoric rise, and now they call him back to host, which I thought was a tremendous honor. And I would love, just this is very selfish of me, but I would just love to learn more of this SNL experience, like taking me through the day. I would love some of the details, what you were going through, the emotions, what it was actually like. Do you remember, or is it all?
Well, I wasn't like part of the day-to-day process at Saturday Night Live. I wasn't hired as a staff writer. I do have credit as a writer because Robert Smigel credited us because
I'm sorry,
me and Colbert.
Your audition.
Oh, the audition for it. Yeah. Well, so what happened for the SNL audition was, here's how I found out about it. I was walking up to Second City, up the stairs, and Dave Koechner was there, and he was like, "Hey, Billy, you might want to check your message box." Whammy! No, he didn't. He wasn't saying whammy. I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went there and checked my message box, and it said that they wanted to see me to lay down an audition on tape at a casting director's office. I was like, "Oh, okay," And so I, threw some ideas together, grabbed some wigs and glasses and stuff like that. I can't even remember what I did for that audition anymore. I didn't do Jackie Gleason taking a difficult crap because I didn't think that would be acceptable on a television show.
Right.
But a bunch of people convinced me later that I should, and I did. I'm glad that they did.
Yeah.
So I went, put myself on tape, and it was partially because my friend Todd Stashwick, they were really looking at him heavily for Saturday Night Live, and he told Marcy Klein, who was kind of scouting talent at Second City, "You should take a look at Bill Chott." And so they took a look at that tape. Might have just wound up, on a series of tapes that nobody looked at, but they looked at mine and decided to bring me in. So then me and Todd and Dave Koechner, Nancy Walls, both of those two wound up getting hired that year. And who else? John Glazer, I think, was one of those people. Brian Stack. Rachel Dretch. Scott Adsit, Jenna Jolovitz, a bunch of those same people who had been in Pinata Full of Bees at that time. All got flown up, put up at the Paramount Hotel, which was really small, but very glamorous and, New York-y.
Sure.
And then they took us all out to eat at this place to eat. Just a couple of the producers. Lauren was not there. From what I understand, Lauren kind of like takes the people that he's already picked that he's going to hire and takes them off to a special dinner later on in the process. But this was like second to last round. But we were there at Studio 8H the next day. We all went into Studio 8H. They put us in dressing rooms. I was in Ellen Cleghorn's dressing room. She was, not there for the summer. So, I got to be, but you could see her stuff was in there still.
And I understand they make you wait just a long time just to pique your anxiety. Do you remember how long they made you wait in there?
I don't remember, but I remember them asking, "Can you any props that you need or any instruments?" And I was like, "Instrument?
Right.
Give me a guitar." Because there was this song that I had written, and can't remember now what that song was anymore. It's been 25 years. But I had just recently written a song. And by the way, don't do a song you've just recently written for your Saturday Night Live audition.
Duly noted.
Should be somewhat polished material. And so I went in there and, the red light's on. I can't see anything other than that red light. And the bleachers way beyond that. So Lorne Michaels must have been there or somewhere standing behind some monitor watching it. I don't know. But they were what they had told us the night before when they took us out to eat was, don't expect any laughter tomorrow. Nobody's there to enjoy what you're doing. They're there to evaluate what you're doing. I think it was Pam Thomas that told me that. And all of a sudden I was like, so don't expect people to like what I'm doing?
Yeah.
No, don't. Just do your thing. And I went out there and I started with my Rush Limbaugh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the only public form of broadcasting left in America. And it killed. I started getting laughs. And I hit a nerve because nobody then was doing a Rush Limbaugh. And still nobody had done a Rush Limbaugh that I know of.
Yeah.
I was the only person doing a Rush Limbaugh. And I was also doing a Rush Limbaugh in the Second City show at the time. There was a bit that Scott Adsit was doing, but Scott wasn't heavy set, so the joke didn't play as well. And nothing against Scott. He's a brilliant comedy performer and probably 10 times the writer I'll ever be. But I think I did a better impression of Rush. And it would go up for grabs when I would do that one line that I'm Rush Limbaugh. And boom, the audience would just go nuts because they wanted more of that.
Right.
And so that was playing really well. And then so I went into my Jackie Gleason, and I think two things killed the bit because I had never done that with him before. Instead of calling it Jackie Gleason taking a difficult shit, which is what we called it, I said Jackie Gleason taking a difficult amount of defecation, something like that. I used way too flowery language because I figured it would be more TD friendly. And yet I literally dropped my pants, which is the lowest thing you could do. It's low humor. Don't do it, kids. And I think that killed the bit. But not in Robert Smigels's eyes.
Yeah.
And at that point, there was no laughs. And then I was trying to work my way through that song, and it was so unmemorable then that I forgot the lyrics halfway through it. And it would have been fine if I probably would have just forgotten and gone through it and then gotten out, or had a tight button and gotten out. But instead, I was like, hold on a second, let me start that again, which is not what you want to do in an audition for a live show.
Right.
So I went back in Ellen Cleghorn's dressing room and cried. I don't know what I was expecting. I should have been brought somewhere else to leave, but I went back into my dressing room to cry. And so I started crying, thinking this is my only shot at show business ever.
Yeah.
And Dave Keckner comes by and goes, don't worry about it, Billy. From what I understand, you're a virgin. And what he meant was, that's your first time auditioning for Saturday Night Live. But what I took it as, how does he know I'm still a virgin? And I started crying even more so.
Oh, wow.
Because at the tender age of 23, 24, I was still a virgin.
Oh, there you go.
I had focused on studies in college, and I had focused on comedy outside of that, and mostly a lot of theater in college too. So that was the end of that process. And then I came home. People were like, how'd it go?
Oh gosh, then you got to tell the story.
Don't want to know because everybody knows. Like, everybody doesn't know about every audition you go on. That's why I don't talk about auditions that I go on now.
Right.
Even if I'm sure it's a lock, and I get great feedback, I don't mention it to anybody. But when you're in Chicago, and everybody who's anybody knows, because they're either on your side and they're your best friends, or they hate you for some reason.
Yeah, they resent you that you got it.
Everybody knows. And probably the people that hate you ask the most, how'd it go?
I notice you're back here.
I find out.
Right.
So
did you actually get a no? Did they call and say thanks but no thanks? Or was it just...
No, I think eventually my agent said, I think they took a pass on you or something like that.
Oof. All right. Well, we took a quick break there. We were back with part 2. I heard about, sounded pretty heartbreaking, SNL audition for you, but, you recouped. You got the Dana Carvey show from that.
Yep.
And again, I think that is so important, that going for a dream, man, sometimes it just can take the knees out, from under you. And I think how you respond to that and how you choose to process that and move forward is so important. And so from that, you booked Dana Carvey show. Dana Carvey, is that how you got booked with the William Morris agency?
What happened was, my buddy Todd Grove, who I had met when he was the talent coordinator at Catch a Rising Star, at that point, he had now... he was working with Rob Becker on Defending the Caveman on Broadway. He was producing that.
Put that up just a little bit. There we go.
if you could snip all that together, or
No, that's fine.
So, so my friend Todd was the talent coordinator at Catch a Rising Star, and then he had come back to visit me in Chicago at one point. We saw a movie together. I think it's Water Tower Place or something, and spent some time together. And but then later on, like, we had kind of lost touch because there was no internet once again.
Right.
And I had like a payphone in my building. I didn't even have, at that point, I think finally I had like one of the a recorded message service that you could get, where you can get a number and then check the number. You call in and check the numbers.
Wow. And
Todd came in just randomly to see the show at Second City. I happened to be understudying for Adam McKay, which was the most featured role in Pinata Full of Bees, and showcased me very well. So he went back and talked to Mike August, who was with William Morris, and said, "Hey, you got to see this guy." And then I was touring with, then I went back on the road with Second City, because, when you were understudying, it'd only be for a short amount of time. For Adam, I was understudying probably the longest amount of time, because we were waiting for Kevin Dorff to get in from out of the country. He was the next, seniority-wise. Usually it went by seniority. If a person had been there longer, they were also understudying a role or whatever, they'd be the next to go in.
Right.
So I knew it was a short amount of time, but as soon as Kevin got back in, I would be back on the road again. So back on the road, and then I checked my messages using that message system, and found out that I was up for, or that Mike had seen. Remember, I told you that industrial that I had done, that the guys that later were doing a commercial. It was that industrial. He had seen a tape of that industrial. It was the only stuff that I had.
Wow.
To send out to anybody. He had seen a tape of that industrial, and he wanted to talk with me. And he was like, well, if you're ever in New York, and I was like, oh, when am I going to be in New York? Right. What I wasn't thinking was, I was in New York State. We just weren't going to be in New York City at the time.
Right.
And the rest of my touring company was like, screw that. We don't have to be in, upstate New York till another day. Let's take the day off. Let's all go. And we talked to our road manager, Steve. Yeah. Wait, no. Anyway, we worked it all out, and we said, can we stay in New York for the night? So we stayed in New York for the night, and I had a meeting that day with Mike August. He was like, I love what I saw, so we'd love to submit you. I was like, okay. And then he submitted me, and I still had an agent in Chicago, but I wasn't exclusive. And I neglected to tell them that he wanted to submit me for this new show, the Dana Carvey Show.
Yeah.
So then I'm back on the road again. I'm doing an industrial that happened to be shooting in New York. And they get a call and say, hey, they want to see you for the Dana Carvey Show. And I was like, I'm doing this industrial. And they said, well, see if you can get off and go over to the ABC studios and meet with them and do this audition.
Yeah.
What? And there was a talk show that we were shooting for. It was a live industrial that was being closed circuit TV to like a bunch of different offices for this company all around the world. And I talked to Joe Keefe, who was the producer at that time, Second City, for the industrials. And I said, hey, Joe, would it be possible to go and audition for this TV show? And he's like, if you could promise me you'll be back, this is a live broadcast. We can't hold the show for you. And I was like, I know. So I hightailed it. I think I even shelled out for a cab. Over to the ABC studios, did the audition. And it went really well. And then later I got flown out a second time for it. And then I got flown out to Los Angeles with a bunch of other folks. And that was its own experience, very different but somehow similar to the SNL experience, because they put us up at a really nice hotel. But it's like, wait a minute, with the Beverly Hilton, or the Beverly Hills Hotel or something, that I had a balcony view of the Hollywood sign. They had like terry cloth robes. And it's the first time I'd ever stayed in a hotel, like when I was a kid, we always went to Holiday Inn or Ramada Inn or something like that. All decent hotels, but never something that had your own robe.
Sure.
So I sat there on a balcony in nothing but my robe, looking at the Hollywood sign, eating corned beef hash and poached eggs.
As you do.
Yeah. And then they drove us all out to Igby's Comedy Club. And thing was, they hadn't like planned this ahead. It was a gift to be able to perform in front of a live audience instead of like a room full of people paid not to laugh.
Right.
Because it was, this is being done by people who had been through the SNL audition process and said, how can we improve on it? And I think everybody said, give us a live audience.
Yeah.
Because we'll do even better.
Right.
And I think Dana knew that because Dana comes alive in front of a live audience.
Right.
But they hadn't like done the logistics for us. So they didn't have meals for us in the parking lot. There was no shade for us in the parking lot of this long gone Igby's Comedy Club, which I think was one of Dana's earliest gigs. I think he talked about on Fly on the Wall. Quote me on that. And I think at one point, Steve Carell was like, I'm going to go get a slice of pizza. And I was like, I'll go with you. And I'm like, Steve, as nice as he is, he's a very nice guy, but he can also be very reclusive.
Oh, gotcha. So he maybe wanted to be alone.
I think he wanted to get the hell away from everybody and like take care of himself and get some food.
Right.
And I was like, remember that old Warner Brothers cartoon? It was like, hey, George, where are we going? And he was hopping off. I was that annoying young energy all around him. And at least that's how I remember it. And then came back and then we read, we went in and we went one by one. They sent us in one by one, close to sunset, or sundown, and then they came back and said they wanted us to read some scripts. And we came in there and I think we read the scripts earlier in the day, but that's where I met Bob Odenkirk. Bob Odenkirk and I were reading a script together because I think at that point they weren't sure whether Mr. Show was going to get picked up for another season. And, he and Smigel went all the way back to, working together in Chicago. So I think if I think Odenkirk probably would have taken one of our spots had Mr. Show not been in production. And then all these agents come out into the parking lot and they're like standing in a circle with their cell phones on and having conversations, one to the other across. There's all this negotiating and shit going on. Like, what in the hell is going on here? Never seen that sort of thing. Maybe they weren't even agents. Maybe they were all network suits or something.
Right.
But I was just like amazed at this process. They were like, it was like a feeding frenzy at a zoo. And then it took like 2 or 3 weeks to finally, it felt like it, to finally get that phone call. And then I got the phone call. My buddy Mike was my roommate at the time, Mike Burson, picks up the phone. He's like, Bill, it's for you. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
Freaked out.
Wow. So how was your confidence going to those auditions based, after what happened at SNL? Had you regrouped by then? Was there some self-doubt?
I had, because what had happened was when I was there, I think at the second audition for Dana Carvey, Smigel comes up and like taps me on the knees like, hey, Bill. And I'm like, how do you know me? I knew him.
Right.
Because, like only if you were a comedy nerd at that point would you know who Smigel was.
Right.
Because, I had seen him on the Saturday Night Live, The Bears and all that. And, I could just tell that he was behind a lot of the funny stuff that was happening at that time. And he's like, I want to make sure that you're going to do Jackie Gleason taking the difficult shit. And I was like, what? I looked at him. I was horrified because I figured that's what lost me SNL. I was like, are you sure? Because Lauren hated it. And he was like, yeah, that's why I think Dana's going to love it. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And sure enough, they all loved that. And they loved the impressions that I was doing and the characters. And well, I decided not to go the route of do my 3 or 4 characters and like write a monologue for them. They had specifically, to make it easier for people, they gave them a monologue and said, you can read this through as 3 different characters if you want.
Yeah.
And I said, what if I read it through one time as like 33 different characters? And some of the characters were just accents. I'll be honest. They weren't like all fleshed out characters.
Sure.
But that's one of the things that I did. Then I kind of like polished it off with the Jackie Gleason taking difficult shit. And
you polished it with shit.
Polished it with shit. Takes a very special person to polish it with shit.
It does, doesn't it?
And then that audition, the final audition there at Igby's was really, the most effortless performance and audition that I had ever done.
Yeah.
Because I did exactly that. I did the monologue through, I had it in front of me. I didn't have to memorize anything. I took the monologue, I had it in hand.
Yeah.
And did the whole thing as the 33 different characters. And I knew, if nothing else, that I killed because I heard the laughter.
Sure.
You can't deny the laughter when you hear it in the room.
Sure.
And then the casting director came out and gave me okay after I was up. And I was like, she can't be doing that after everybody. And I kind of like stood around to make sure, I was the first one in the room.
Yeah.
Which can be a dangerous position, as you know, to be the first one up.
Yeah.
But often when you're reading for network, they'll look at the person they want to push and they want to hire most up first, because they're not thinking of, this is, a stand-up set or, performing in front of a bunch of people and you need an opening act. So either that or I was a sacrificial lamb and wound up, still snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. One way or another, it worked out really well that I was first.
Yeah. So you get the Dana Carvey show, and again, we're talking about highs and lows, and then the show itself gets canceled.
Yeah,
did that just also feel like, my gosh, is this ever going to happen? Or
it was, to a certain degree, it was a disappointment already because I was not in that many sketches at the show. I was very light, and I was really upset that I wasn't being utilized that much. The stuff that I was writing wasn't probably suitable for a primetime sketch show. I was writing about, like a sitcom about St. Thomas Aquinas, the theologian. St. Thomas Aquinas, world famous theologian, from canonical bents to the sacraments, he'll think it through for you. And he appears as this magical creature, as this Irish Catholic priest accidentally reads from the rite of excommunication instead of the rite of funeral rite. And they're like, oh, no, now to spend forever in purgatory. And no, St. Thomas Aquinas came and solved the mystery for them. So that sort of thing really wasn't going to fly on network television for a bunch of different, first of all, because it's religion.
Right.
Second of all, it's way too thinky.
Sure. So was the Dana Carvey show, so you would have to write your own bits and then pitch them to try to get them into the show?
They never told us what the process was. And from what I understand, that's the exact same process as Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
They kind of throw you to figure out what's going on here. They didn't say this is the day we'll have table read. This is the day that we'll pitch. This is the day that we'll do whatever. Matter of fact, I don't remember ever there being a pitch meeting.
Interesting.
Where Saturday Night Live that's part of their process. At least there's a known process that on Monday, I guess, they pitch. And then Tuesday they write, and then Wednesday they start going into rehearsal or whatever. But we never had like a pitch around the room sort of a thing.
Right. So you already kind of felt disappointed that, I think it was 8 episodes, 9 episodes, something like that.
Less than that. I think it was 7 episodes. Maybe 6 aired and 7 total.
Gotcha.
Like that.
So you didn't get in a lot of sketches. Show got canceled, but
very unceremoniously, I found out by reading it in USA Today. Nobody told me. My agent never said hey, by the way, they're not coming back.
Jeez.
Our final episode never aired. We all got together to watch it because our premiere episode, we all got together to watch it live as it aired on TV that first time.
How'd you feel about that? How'd you feel watching it? Did you think this is a hit, or did you have no idea?
Here was the thing: a lot of the crew on it had worked on the original Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. So
they had worked with Belushi and Aykroyd and those guys, and they were like, "We've never seen a cast this strong. This is you guys. So everybody behind the scenes had faith in it. Some of the strongest names in comedy, and then a lot of people who were yet to be undiscovered strong names in comedy were involved in it. So I was sure it was going to be a huge hit. And even when it was canceled, there was talk of Lorne Michaels picking it up and putting it in prime time on NBC. But Dana was having some health problems at the time, which made that impossible to do. But so we had our final screening, and everybody was like, "Oh man, this kind of sucks that we don't get to see it air live on TV." But we had like a big goodbye party that was fun. Well, we assumed it was our big goodbye party because the show wasn't being aired even on television.
Right. Wow. Okay. So that happens, but then that was the catalyst for you moving to LA, right?
Pretty much. I stayed there for a while, doing some commercial work
in New York.
Yeah, I auditioned for a bunch of different films, very high-profile films, none of which I wound up getting. Largely because back then you would have to send something Federal Express. You'd put it on an actual physical videotape, and then send it via Federal Express across the country. And so everybody who was out in LA, they were already being seen. So you're getting at the bottom of the stack.
Right.
And I saw that happen, and I was like, well, I can't afford an apartment in New York and an apartment in LA. And back then, there was still such a thing as pilot season, because there were still only 4 major networks producing their own material, and they were all doing it at the same time. So I knew I needed to be in LA for that, or I'd be missing out.
Yeah.
And so I decided it's time to go. So hopped in the Festiva, drove west.
Out to Hollywood.
To Burbank.
So let's talk. So I feel like, wow. By the way, thanks for all sharing this. I've known parts of this, but I don't think I've ever really like drilled down in a lot of this. So it's fascinating for me to hear all of this. So now you're in LA. Let's pick up some highlights of your career in LA, because I know you've been out here now for 276 a year, something like that.
Yes,
years and years and years. So obviously we could talk for hours and hours, but let's maybe just talk some like real high highs in LA in terms of your career, just real incredible high experiences, and then again, some of those kind of heartbreaking discouragements I think are important to talk about and be transparent.
I would say the discouragements haven't happened until recently.
Interesting.
There weren't a lot of projects that I went up for that I didn't get that I really, really, really wanted.
Okay.
There's been a lot of stuff that I was like, all right, I'll audition for this, but there weren't that many things like, when I went out for the movie The Ringer, it was tailor-made for me to step into that situation, because I had been doing the character of Thomas as a character named Frederick for years. I'd done him in Second City. And people loved him because it was never punching down on him. He was always punching up at authority figures and showing them how dumb they were.
Right.
And so, he was a character who was mentally challenged, but he was challenging literally everyone else. And so when that movie came along, I went in, I did the first audition with Barry Blaustein, who was the director. And Barry said to me, like, I went in character. I went in with the glasses, these big, thick Coke bottle glasses, and dressed a little bit differently than I normally dress. And he said, "You're in my movie. I don't know where, but you're in my movie." And then there was a setback with that movie because I was told that. And it looked like the movie was going forward. And, I went in for several other auditions where they were like doing like, for chemistry, figuring out which guys would work as the main ensemble. And then I didn't hear anything. And they said, well, Fox isn't really certain they're really worried about this movie and the reaction, for obvious reasons, because, it's about somebody trying to rig the Special Olympics. And unless you know that the Special Olympics is 100% behind the movie,
right,
and really you're supporting the movie because it had a positive message, you'd go, oh, no, this sounds like box office poison.
Right.
But so Fox passed on it. And, it was written by Ricky Blitt, who a lot of people know from Family Guy. And he's written a bunch of funny stuff now, too. But he had written a great script. Barry believed in it and had been championing it. And the Farrelly brothers got behind it. And then now all of a sudden Fox didn't want anything to do with it. And that was like, oh man, because it was such an easy audition process. I stepped in there with a fully 3-dimensional character, ready to take it, and I knew that I would, do well in that environment. And then, like a year and a half later, maybe 2 years later, I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland, with Baby Wants Candy, which is an improvised musical. I was sitting in for Josh Funk, who couldn't make it out at that point. He was doing something back in Chicago. And so I was kind of like understudying, but like actually performing for like 2 weeks in that festival, which was awesome. And every day I would go to one of those red phone booths and use a calling card to check my old voice message back in LA.
Yeah.
And then I got a message from my manager saying the ringer's back on. Oh my God. And then we went down to start rehearsing. We went to Austin, Texas, which is where we shot the movie, like a month in advance of when we were going to start shooting. 2 months. Because they wanted to have us do some table reads, because they wanted us to improvise some and see how that would work. And they wanted to make sure that we got real Olympic training, which was murder for my body. I'm not an athletic person. I've never been in sports. Some of the guys like Jed Rees already knew how to do a perfect high jump.
Oh, wow.
Knoxville was ready to, try anything.
Yeah, of course.
And, some of his most important things were actually done by a stunt, in that people would find it hard to believe that he used a stuntman, but, the studio makes you in certain places. They're like, no, we're not going to let our star take that risk.
Right.
But, like you see me in the film, like running over hurdles and knocking everyone down. To do that, I had to learn how to do hurdles correctly so that I could screw it up. So we had to do all that. And they wanted us to fully understand the culture of Special Olympics. So we got to meet all kinds of Special Olympians. We went to a Special Olympians bowling event. All of us went on a boat tour down the river in Austin, and you see all the bats at sunset. And then we were ready to go. We were supposed to come back in another week or so and start shooting. But all of a sudden, things got put on hold. I was like, no way, not again. And what had happened was the studio saw the early, the dailies of what was coming in and what they had shot. And Barry had made this decision to shoot it kind of like Joe versus the volcano. And, like when he's working at his office in the very beginning, to be this gray, depressing thing. And then when you hit Special Olympics, it's this wonderful, colorful, beautiful place. But all they were seeing is this gray, dull, drudgy stuff about this movie that's, without the context, is a very dark movie anyway. And so they like fired the DP and the whole production team. And, I think they wanted Barry to step down, and he was like, no, not after all the work that I put into this movie and the heart I put into this movie. But they weren't telling anybody what was going on, because I was later found that out, Now it can be told.
Right.
But at the time, nobody wanted to discuss that. All I knew was this dream project was now being postponed a second time.
And how are you getting by during this time? Are you just booking commercial shoots? Or you
mostly? I had done so many different commercials. I wasn't really teaching at that point yet.
And you did say you had a bank job there for when you first moved out, or did you?
No, that was for Chicago. When I moved out here, I was just working in accounting at Disney. That was only for like a week or maybe a month.
Oh yeah. Okay. But you're making a living.
Yeah,
you're surviving
for all that time. I was surviving off of commercials and TV and movie.
Gotcha.
I had done a lot of I did several guest star roles on Third Rock from the Sun. I was on ER. I had done the movie Galaxy Quest by then.
Yeah.
I was getting residuals from Galaxy Quest. Commercial voiceover. So I was existing from all that. It wasn't until after the movie The Ringer that I started teaching and started my own improv school. And that was just because, I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, because then the movie, the Ringer, was delayed being released. We had it all in the can, ready to go, and then the Red Sox got in the World Series, and that was right when the Fairley Brothers' next project was Fever Pitch, which was about the Red Sox being in the World Series.
Right.
So you had Red Sox fever all over the nation. They were able to actually film it live.
Right. That's Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore, right?
Yes. They filmed.
So they put your movie on hold just because
they had to push that to release it. I don't blame them, knowing what I know now about the movie industry. You've got a hot topic, after you have Red Sox fever and everybody, the whole country's excited for the Red Sox. You can't wait another year and a half, and then finally come out with a movie about that.
Yeah. When
you've got footage of that World Series in the movie that you can release. And those guys are the biggest Red Sox fans in the world.
Sure.
Because they're from Rhode Island. Big Patriots fans too. So it got put on the back shelf. And then I was like, is it never going to come? Is it never going to happen? And then it did. And then, yay, it's this awesome thing that we saw the cut of, and it's hilarious. But it didn't do so good at the box office. It found a cult following later. There's a lot of fans of, I run into a lot of fans of The Ringer on TikTok now.
Yeah.
But people have to remember, it didn't do that well. Either did Galaxy Quest. When Galaxy Quest first came out, it came out also at the holidays. And it was primed to be a big success. But, Galaxy Quest was dependent upon people being Trekkies to get it, kind of.
Right.
Or, and I think more Trekkies were born after, Galaxy Quest came out, and, so many seasons happened after that. But, most of the projects that I've been in gathered cult fame a lot later. And even Wizards of Waverly Place, which happened years and years after that, gained fame because it was Disney was running it late at night.
Right.
So that the younger kids who normally wouldn't have watched the show were like, ooh, this is the stay-up show.
Right.
This is late night. It's a baddie show that my older brothers and sisters watch. Now I get to. So they got to pretend it was even cooler than it was. And it was cool.
Yeah.
It was one of the coolest shows on the Disney Channel for a bunch of different reasons, including the fact that Selena was on it, including the fact that Peter Murrieta was the showrunner, and he always made sure that it was edgy and that it had jokes for the grown-ups.
Right.
My character's name in Wizards of Waverly Place was Mr. Larry Tate. It was a joke on Larry Tate from Bewitched. So there were all these grown-up jokes being sprinkled all throughout every episode, in addition to, it was the first Disney show that was a family show instead of just a kids show. It wasn't just about the kids. It was about the whole family and how they, how they functioned as a family.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about Wizards of Waverly Place. I never watched the show, but I know
most
that
adults haven't.
Right.
Although my old college roommate and his wife, who's also a good friend of mine, wound up watching, and they later confessed, they were like, it wouldn't even matter if you were on it or not. We just loved the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember when I did my 40th birthday show, and I had you and Dave, Bill Does Magic as well, on top of all of this, magic. And I did a big variety show, and Bill performed, and some of my nieces saw that, and then they were like, that's Principal Larry, or whatever. And so they were really excited. I think I might have, did I have you give him a shout out? You might have even given him a video shout out.
I'm pretty sure you did. Yeah. Well, it seems true. I do a lot of those, so I'm sorry if I don't remember exactly their names, but God bless you, girls.
So, tell us a little bit about, let's talk about Wizards of Waverly Place. And then, you had mentioned previously that you've had some discouragement recently. So I'd like to, we don't obviously have to go into any of the details, but we can just talk about that and then maybe close up with some general dreaming, inspirational stuff. Call it good. How's that sound?
Sounds great. So, Wizards happened at a time when I thought my career wasn't coming back. Because, The Ringer came out, and then the pilot season after that, nothing happened. And I was used to being through pilot seasons, but nothing happened. But my wife at the time was thinking something completely different was going to be happening after that movie came out. And it was her first exposure to Hollywood and seeing all that happen and the rise of a project and knowing that it's coming out. And she met me when I was filming it, and so she was kind of disappointed in that. I was disappointed too because I thought there would have been some forward movement, more opportunities. And so we bought a house back in St. Louis and moved back to St. Louis. And that's when I really focused on Improv Trick. I had started it around the time the Ringer came out because there wasn't more work coming in. And I was like, oh, well, we could do this. And so started teaching classes, really focused on it in St. Louis. And then I made an arrangement with my manager and my agent at the time that I would always put myself on tape for projects and send it out to LA. Well, although then you could upload it, you didn't have to send it.
Ooh.
How about that? A little step move up in the
There you go. Still had to go to the newsstand, though, huh?
Yeah, I went to the newsstand, got a cigar, got my shoe shine.
Only cost you a nickel.
No, by that point it was inflation, 7 cents.
7 cents.
So I had an audition for the movie called Better. What was it called? All About Steve with Sandra Bullock. And so I got called back to meet with the director and was going to be flying all the way out here for it. 2 setbacks happened, or one setback happened, which was my, more than just a setback. My cousin was killed on his scooter, hit by a truck. And that news came in the night before I left. And I'm just thinking about, how does the family move on from this? And, how soon are we having the funeral? What is happening from this point forward? How do I reach out to my aunt, which I couldn't because I was about to fly across the country. And so, as I'm getting on the flight, or as I'm getting ready for the flight, my agent calls and said, while you're on your way to LA, we got another audition set up for you. I was like, what? What is it? Oh, it's this Disney role. It's a guest star role. I was like, I don't have time. I really, my priority is getting there, working on this film audition, getting some coaching for that, and then going in and doing a good job on this. And they were like, well, if you can do this. And I was like, I won't be able to do it. I'm going to, there's no way that I can get there, get a rental car and get to the studio by the time the studio's, while the studio's still open. So they said, well, just try. And so I did, flew in, got the rental car. I didn't even memorize the lines. I looked at them slightly on the flight, but I was really memorizing the lines for the other audition on the flight. Showed up at the studio. It was like 6:00 and my audition was at 5:30 and they said 5:30 was the latest that I could go in.
Sure.
And I called and I said, so I'm here outside the studio. Should I bother to go in? They said, yes, they're waiting for you. So I went in. I read for the part. As I'm walking off the lot, they said, you're on avails, which for those who don't know, means that you're, I want to check you're highly considered. They want to make sure you're available for the production dates. And that meant that I was going to have to fly back in for the shoot. I can't even remember at this point whether I flew back in or whether I stayed out for it.
Well, but your cousin is passed, and so I'm sure you're also what house is going to coordinate with any potential funeral plans or anything like that.
I didn't know how that was going to affect that. I didn't know how, I didn't know how I could find it within me to even care about the audition, and I didn't care. It was the least I ever cared for an audition, and yet they told me it was the quickest anybody had ever been hired for a guest star role on a Disney project.
Wow.
For a role they knew was going to wind up being a considerable role in the series. So that's another example of me kind of giving up on things and then it's still coming through.
Yeah. So, well, let's.
And it went on for like 5 years. Yeah, seasons, 5 years,
and ended up being, I think, probably your most recognizable, at least recent role, except for probably maybe the mailman on This Is Us. I know that got a lot of visibility.
That did get a lot of visibility, and that was another time, like I was surrendering to fatherhood. I was just focused on being a dad, and then it was right after my daughter was born, right after my dad had passed, and talk about another like turnaround. They brought me in and they did not tell me that the character of William had died. In the script, it said William is upstairs sleeping. And so they said, so we need you to have a genuine, honest reaction to the fact that your friend is now dead, which was not what I had prepared and not what the script had said. And so I was literally tearing up because of my own emotions. I was so pissed that was thrown at me at the last second. And
arrogant, yeah.
It worked because my honest emotion to that got me the job. But then I was like, how do I access that?
Right.
On set. And I was able to access it mainly because Sterling Brown, who's also a St. Louisan, go St. Louis, was so generous with his time. They pick you up on in the van from, where the trailers are and everything to where they're filming in the studio. And he was like, you want to run lines? And I had never had a series lead ask me if I wanted to run lines before going in. Because it wasn't a considerable amount of lines, for him. And so he was doing it to support me, to help me out. And he was very, very encouraging. And at a certain point, they were wanting to like keep on running it to make sure they were getting the lights. And he was like, guys, can we just do what you need to do? I could tell this is going to be emotional for him. And I don't, so he was really protecting me.
Yeah.
And shot it. And we did so many different takes of it and so many different degrees of intensity of emotion and it was originally written with, there was a joke in there written too about me saying like, here's one of William's favorite jokes. I started to tell a dirty joke. And, they cut that part out.
Oh yeah.
So they could have gone either way with it. They could have gone a little bit more, jocular and like, well, it's really sad that he died. Or they could have taken the take they did, which was, people have said like, I don't even watch that show, and I was destroyed watching you react to the news of his death. So yeah, I've been recognized a lot for that one, but that was another one that came at a time when I wasn't expecting it. It was blown away.
Yeah.
So then we talk about, what's happened now. So I've gone through a period of time where I was divorced from my first wife, the one that I mentioned earlier, that I moved to St. Louis with. And as a result of that, I met the mother of my daughter. But we separated about 2 years ago. And it was right before the holidays, which is my favorite time of year. So kind of like really started off that holiday season with a really big curveball.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us wanted it, but I was sure not expecting it. And so that happened on top of, we were just climbing our way back out of a pandemic. Or, by the way, there's coronavirus still out there, folks. But the heights of it, the shutdown and the lockdown, things were just starting to open up again. And then we separated, in the process of a divorce. And then, just around time where things started to really open up again and the industry started to get chugging, boom, the strike. Sure. The longest strike in the history of the Screen Actors. And what we're staring down now is, more than likely a strike with IATSE and the Teamsters, another strike coming up. So, I think anybody else would be incredibly discouraged by that bad news, but I can't see anything other than good news coming after the bad news.
Wow.
You can only get so much bad news. And I think I reached a saturation point. I believe something is on the horizon that is better than anything that I've done before. that is going to be more powerful than anything that I've done before, that is going to be more lucrative than anything I've done before. And the beautiful thing is, I don't know what it is, and I've given up trying to demand what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I no longer want to for sure do comedy, so it could easily be drama. I also don't need to be taken seriously as a dramatic actor, so I'll be happy if it's comedy. It could even be as a broadcaster or a game show host.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with whatever will come my way, because every time it has been an amazing new thing.
Yeah.
It's been a while since there's been a new one, you know? Just recently I did voiceover for an anime called Pluto on Netflix. And I don't know anything about the world of anime or manga, but it came out as a manga a few years ago and had a huge sensation. And I just kind of like stumbled into that. And that's not a huge project because I'm not on screen and I'm not the original voice. Sure. Originally recorded in Japanese. But, things like that come along. And I know something else is coming along, and I don't know what it'll be, but it's always been something great, and it's always been something that's been affirming for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's really incredible. And I feel that too, and can't wait until we get part 2 of this and get to find out what that is. And so thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your story. And again, we've been friends for a long time, and I'm so grateful to you. You've been a huge support of me. You've always had my back. You let me. Now I'm crashing on your couch although I get
pay it forward, everybody.
I get a bed.
He gets a bed.
I get an upgrade from your early days, and so just so great to be able to talk to you in this context. Of course, we always catch up and talk all the time, and yeah, I'm just so appreciative, so grateful. That you would come share this, your stories, your experiences, your wisdom, and really much, very much, as I'm sure you are, looking forward to seeing how all of this bad news, this saturation of bad news.
I left out an opportunity. I could be a singer. I could be a musician.
Oh, and you could be.
I've done that all my life, and it could be magic too. Yeah, well, there's a very good friend of ours is a producer, who has talked about producing The Charlatans, the magic act that we do, off Broadway and even internationally. So who knows? That could happen too. So I'm not discounting anything. Anything could be the next step. I'm ready for it. There's an affirmation that I do in the mornings. There's different affirmations that I do. One of them is, thank you. I don't know what's best for me. What you have in mind for me is better than my wildest dreams. Please show me. What do I need to know, and what do I need to do?
And let it be so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope that this was helpful on your dreams, on your journeys, whatever you're going through, whatever processes you're experiencing. If you're in a down period or an up period, wherever you're at, hearing Mr. Bill Chott here, who has been a dreamer his whole life, had such incredible experiences, and even through all the bad times, finding the faith and the courage to keep moving forward and just trusting that a good thing is coming around the corner. So I love all of you so much. I hope your dreams are going well. Thank you so much for listening to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast, and I will check in with you tomorrow.